class. So this week we will learn on a new chapter, which is chapter 4, Biological Molecules. So at the end of the lesson later, you should be able to describe what is the importance of functional group to the organic molecules, and to identify, you are able also to identify the biological macromolecules with its physical and chemical properties, and also you should be able to classify the physiological roles of macromolecules and its example. Therefore, there are four biological molecules that you will study in this chapter, which are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and also nucleic acids. So what is biological molecules? Biological molecule is referred to the molecules that consist of a carbon bonded to carbon, which also called as a carbon backbone. Okay, or a carbon that bonded to other molecule. As you can see over here, carbon bonded with carbon, carbon bonded with carbon, and this one also carbon bonded with carbon, and carbon bonded with other molecules. Therefore, carbon can form up to 4 covalent bonds because the valence electrons of carbon is 4. Okay, that's why carbon can make up 4 covalent bonds with other atoms. And the bonded of the carbon atom with the functional group will give a specific properties to the biological molecules. So what is functional groups? Functional groups is referred to the groups of atoms that occur within the organic molecules, or refer to the carbon backbone, and therefore the attachment of the functional group to the carbon backbone will give a specific chemical properties to the biological molecules, and they always denoted as R. Okay, and where you can find these functional groups? Functional groups, as I mentioned earlier, it can be found along or attached to the carbon backbone of macromolecules, in which they can form by change or a ring of carbon atoms. Okay, and there are 7 functional groups that you have to remember, which specific participate in chemical reactions, which are hydroxyl group, methyl group, carbonyl, carboxyl, amino group, phosphate, and also sulfhydryl groups. And these groups involve in a very important role in the formations of molecules like the DNA, the proteins, carbohydrates, and also lipids. Okay, so what are the properties of these functional groups? Functional groups usually classified as either hydrophobic or hydrophilic, that depends on the charge or the polarity of the functional groups. Okay, so among the hydrophilic functional group, carboxyl group, okay, found in the amino acids, some of amino acid side chain, and also the fatty acid. Okay, all of this you will learn after this, that will form a triglycerol and also phospholipid. So this carboxyl group, they can be able to ionize to release the hydrogen ions from the COOH group or from the carboxyl group, thus resulting in the negatively charged COO group. Okay, so this one, the release of the hydrogen ion will contribute to the hydrophilic nature of the molecules that having this type of functional group. And other types of functional group, which is hydrophilic, is carbonyl group, where the carbonyl group, they have a partially negatively charged oxygen atom that can or that may be formed or bonded to the hydrogen bonds of water molecules, in which hydrogen bonds of water molecule are partially positive, that can attracted to the partially negative charged oxygens of the carbonyl groups. Okay, therefore it making the molecules that having this carbonyl group more hydrophilic. So let's look on each of the functional group. The first one is hydroxyl group. So hydroxyl group is referred to the group where, as you can see here, the hydrogen atoms will form a polar covalent bonds, meaning to say they are sharing the electron unequally, okay, with the oxygen atom, and also they form a polar covalent bond to the carbon backbone, okay. And due to the polar covalent bond over here, the hydroxyl group, which is the OH, can improve the solubility of the organic molecules when they attach to the molecules. So organic compounds with hydroxyl group, which is the OH, are known as alcohol, and their name typically end in OL, okay, such as ethanol and also methanol. The second functional group is carbonyl group. So carbonyl group is a functional group where, as you can see here, the oxygen atom will bonded to the carbon backbone here, okay, by a double bond. And this oxygen can bonded to the carbon skeleton either at the end of the carbon atom of the carbon skeleton or in the middle of the carbon in the carbon skeleton, okay. If the attachment of the carbonyl group at the end of the skeleton, the compound is known as aldehyde. Meanwhile, if they are not bonded at the end of the skeleton, therefore it is known as a ketone. Next is carboxyl groups. So carboxyl group is referred to the functional group where the carbon atom of the carbon backbone, they will form a double bond with an oxygen atom, and then they will form a single bond to a hydroxyl group, which is OH group. So the compounds that having this carboxyl group are known as carboxylic acid, and they act as an acid in which they are able to increase the concentrations of the hydrogen ion in the solution. Next is amino group. Amino group is a functional group where, as you can see over here, the nitrogen atom attached to two hydrogen atom, and also it attached to the carbon skeleton, okay. And the organic compound that having this type of functional group are known as amines, okay. And the amino group acts as a base because ammonia can pick up a hydrogen ion from the solution. Therefore, it helps to reducing the hydrogen ion concentration in that solution. And amino acid is the building blocks of the protein, where the amino acid having amino group and also carboxyl group in their molecules. Next is sulfhydryl group. Sulfhydryl group is a functional group where the sulfur atom will bonded to the hydrogen atom, and then it will form a bond to the carbon skeleton, okay. And organic molecules with the sulfhydryl groups are known as thiols, in which their function help to stabilize the structure of the protein molecules. Next is phosphate group. Phosphate group is a group where the phosphate will bonded to four oxygen atom, in which one of the bond is actually a double bond, okay. And phosphate group are an ion with two negative charge, okay, as you can see over here. And one important functions of the phosphate group is to transfer energy between the organic molecule, such as in the ATP molecule. Last but not least is methyl group. Methyl group is a group where the carbon atom, okay, where the carbon atom are bonded with 3 hydrogen atoms, as you can see here. And the organic molecules that having this type of groups are known as methylated compounds. And the functions of this group usually can affect the expressions of the genes when they bound to the DNA, or also the arrangement of the methyl group in male and female sex hormone can affect their shapes and also the function. Okay, next is macromolecules. So macromolecules is referred to large molecules that compose of thousands covalently connected atoms, in which the functional groups, as I mentioned earlier, okay, will give a specific structure to the macromolecule when they are attached to that macromolecule, and thus giving a specific function to that macromolecules. Next is a polymer. Okay, a polymer is referred to a long macromolecules. Okay, it refer to a long molecules thus producing the macromolecules that in which it consisting of many similar building block. Okay, so the building block, the one that make up the polymer, are known as the monomer. So if you have more than two monomer that are connected or bonded to each other, they will form a polymer. And there are 3 or 4 classes of biological molecules are polymer, which are carbohydrates, proteins, and also nucleic acid, where these 3 types of biological molecules have their own monomer, the building blocks, to produce the polymer of carbohydrates, proteins, and also nucleic acid. However, lipids do not have any monomer. Okay? And polymer can be synthesized. We can produce the polymer, we can synthesize the polymer through the dehydration reaction or condensation reaction, in which when the two monomer lose water molecules through dehydration reaction or condensation reaction, it will form a bond between these two monomer or between monomer with the short polymer. And then this polymer structure can also be breaking down using through the process of hydrolysis, in which the additions of the water to the disassembled polymer will cause the breakdown of the bond between these two polymer, between these two monomer or monomer with a short polymer. So as you can see here, this is an example of the hydration process or condensation process that used to synthesizing a polymer. This one is they give an example of a short polymer with the monomer, in which the removal of the water component, hydrogen ion from the first polymer, and then the hydroxyl group from the monomer combine together, thus producing water, and then will help to create a bond between the short polymer and also the monomer. Meanwhile, hydrolysis, the additions of the water, will break down this monomer and this polymer into a several monomer, as you can see over here. Now let's look into the organic compounds. Organic compounds is actually referred to the biological molecules, where organic compounds is a chemical compound that contains carbons, the carbon atom that originates from the living things. Okay, so the types of organic compounds, there are 4 types of organic compounds. We have carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acid. So as I mentioned earlier, carbohydrate, protein, and nucleic acid have their own monomer. except for lipids. Now let's look first on the first organic compounds, which is carbohydrate, where the carbohydrates is the largest group of the organic compounds that containing the carbon atom, hydrogen atom, and also oxygen atom in their structure. So the monomer of the carbohydrate is known as a monosaccharide. Meanwhile, the polymer of carbohydrate is known as a polysaccharide. And the carbohydrate produced by the green plants and bacteria using the photosynthesis process. And examples of carbohydrates are sugar, starch, cellulose, and also glycogen, where the formula of the carbohydrate is CnH2ON, where N is equal to either 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. Okay, so the functions of carbohydrates can be either as the source as the source of the energy for the food storage and also for the structure of the plant cell wall. And there are three classes of carbohydrates. The first one is the monosaccharides, which are the monomer of the carbohydrates molecules. Examples of monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, and galactose. And the second class of carbohydrates are disaccharides, where disaccharide is actually a combination of two monomer of monosaccharides. Example of disaccharides are maltose, sugar, and lactose. And the third class of carbohydrates are polysaccharides, which is referred to the polymer of the carbohydrates, and it contains hundreds of monosaccharides that join together to form a long chain through a condensation or dehydration reaction, such as starch, glycogen, cellulose, and also chitin. Now let's look on the first class of carbohydrate, which is monosaccharides. So mono means single and saccharum means sugar in the Greek language. And the properties of monosaccharide, usually they are sweet in taste, crystalline, low molecular mass, and also soluble in water. Examples of the monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, and galactose, in which the general formula of monosaccharide is CH2O, okay, in bracket with N, where the N here is varies from 3 to 8. So it can be C3H6 because 2 multiplied by 3 is 6, O3, or C4H8O4, and etc. until 8. And they also can be classified by the number of the carbon backbone here. If the carbon backbone consists of 3 carbon atoms, therefore they are known as a triose. If the carbon backbone consists of 4 carbon atoms, they are known as tetrose. If the carbon backbone contain or consisting of 4 carbon atoms, so they are 5 carbon atoms, they are known as a pentose, and etc. So the examples of monosaccharide, as you can see here, are glucose and galactose, where glucose and galactose are consisting of 6 carbon. They contain of 6 carbon atom in the carbon skeleton, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, similar with also the fructose. However, the galactose and also the glucose only differ in the way where the hydroxyl group, as you can see here, the hydroxyl group of the locations of the hydroxyl group between the galactose and also the glucose differ from each other at the 4th carbon. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 here. Okay, so glucose at the left side, meanwhile galactose at the right side. So when glucose and combine, Okay, when the monomer of glucose, monomer galactose combine together, they will form a disaccharide that is known as lactose. Okay, so therefore the molecular formula of glucose and galactose are similar except for the locations of the hydroxyl group in the carbon at the carbon atom number 4 in the carbon skeletons, and also glucose can exist in both open and cyclic form. Meanwhile, galactose can exist in both open and also can exist in both open change and also cyclic form. And glucose can be found in the juice, fruits, and also the sugar. Meanwhile, galactose can be found in gum, sugar beets, dairy products, and also mucilage. Okay, and glucose can be broken down in the body and used as directly used as the source of the body fuel and also energy. However, for galactose, okay, monomer galactose, they cannot be easily broken down as it needs to go another pathway in the body in order to be used as the energy or the body fuel. And next is that monosaccharide have a carbonyl group and also have a carbonyl group as you can see here, and they have a multiple hydroxyl group. Okay, this one OH is hydroxyl group. They have multiple of hydroxyl group and also they have a carbonyl group. However, the locations of the carbonyl group between monosaccharide is differ from each other. So if the carbonyl group is located at the end of the carbon skeleton, therefore the sugar or the monosaccharide is known as the aldose or aldehyde saccharide. And if the locations of the carbonyl group is not at the end of the carbon skeleton, therefore the monosaccharide is known as ketose or ketone sugar. So another examples of monosaccharide with 3 carbon atom in the carbon backbones are glyceraldehyde and dihydroxyacetone. Examples of pentose sugar, ribose and ribulose, where and then next is the second class of carbohydrates is disaccharides. So the chemical formula of disaccharide is C12H22 or 11. And by its name, di mean two, saccharide is referred to the monomers of monosaccharide. Therefore, it means disaccharide consists of two monosaccharides that are joined together by a glycosidic bond, okay, through the process of condensation or dehydration process, where the removal of water will create a bond, a glycosidic bond between these two monosaccharides, thus forming disaccharide. And the breakdown of the disaccharide back into its monomer through the process of hydrolysis. And the properties of disaccharides are they are small, sweet in taste, soluble in water, and also they can form crystal structure. Example of disaccharides are maltose, sucrose, and also lactose. So maltose is made up from monomer glucose and also glucose. Meanwhile, sucrose disaccharide is made up from monomer fructose and monomer glucose. Meanwhile, lactose is made up from monomer galactose and also monomer glucose, okay, through the dehydration process, removal of the water, okay. So maltose disaccharide, also known as malt sugar, okay, where you can find it in the germinating barley grains. Next is disaccharide, sucrose disaccharide, also known as a cane sugar or the table sugar, which made up from monosaccharide glucose and monosaccharide fructose. And lactose, also known as a milk sugar, in which this disaccharide is made up from monosaccharide glucose and monosaccharide galactose, where it can be found in the milk of the mammal and can be used as a source of the energy. So why is the chemical formula of disaccharide is C12H22O11? Why not disaccharide formula is C12H24 and H24 and O12? Okay, as you can see here, disaccharide is a combination of two monomer, right? So one monomer is C6H12O6. When there are two monomer, it will be C12H24 or 12. However, the monosaccharide, these two monosaccharide are linked together. They will form a bond, glycosidic bond, with the removal of water. So removal of water is H2O, meaning to say it needs to remove two hydrogen atom and one oxygen atom from its structure, thus producing disaccharide with the chemical formula of C12H22O11. And disaccharide functions. Disaccharide can also can be classified into two groups. The first one is reducing sugar, and also the second one is non-reducing sugar. So reducing sugar, such as maltose and lactose, is referred to the sugar that can reduce the copper C plus ion, which are blue color in the Benedict solution, and then it reduces it into copper plus ion, which are color red brick in color after the heating process. Okay, meanwhile, sucrose is non-reducing sugar, in which it does not able to reduce the copper ion, 2 plus ion into copper ion. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, the bond that link between two monosaccharide, okay, through the process of condensation to form disaccharide are known as a glycosidic linkage or glycosidic bond. So next is polysaccharide, okay, or the polymer of the carbohydrates. Polysaccharide is referred to the hundreds of monosaccharide, a chain of hundreds of monosaccharide that are linked together by the glycosidic linkage or the glycosidic bond, okay, in which the properties of the polysaccharide usually they are large in size, okay, they are not sweet in taste, and they are also insoluble in water. And the polysaccharide can be divided into two types, which are storage polysaccharides such as glycogen and starch, and also structural polysaccharides such as cellulose and chitin. Now let's look one by one into this type of polysaccharide. Okay, for storage polysaccharide that can be found in plant is starch. So starch consists of only glucose monomer. Okay, an example of starch are amylose and also amylopectin. Meanwhile, the storage polysaccharide that can be found in animal is glycogen. So glycogen stored in liver and also muscle cells of human and also other disaccharides, and they have a branches polymer like amylopectin. For the structural polysaccharide that can be found in plant cell is cellulose. Cellulose, like the starch, is a polymer of a glucose. However, okay, the entire cellulose is made up of entirely the glucose monomer. However, the difference between cellulose, okay, between the cellulose differ with the starch is the glycosidic linkage. Okay, as you can see over here, the starch, okay, the storage polysaccharide, all of the hydroxyl group, okay, is located at the bottom of the structure. Meanwhile, for the cellulose, okay, the structural polysaccharide that you can find in the plant cell, the locations of the hydroxyl group is alternate. Okay, some of it are at the bottom and some of it are located at the upper parts of the ring. Next is chitin. Chitin is the structural polysaccharide that can be found in the exoskeletons of the arthropods, in which it provides the structural supports for the cell wall also of many fungi, and it can also be used as the surgical thread. Okay, and therefore this is the summary of carbohydrates. The monomer of carbohydrate is monosaccharide. Example: glucose, galactose, and fructose, where they can be divided into aldose and also ketose group, and they can form linear or ring form. And this monosaccharide can combine together to form a disaccharide through a dehydration process, and thus forming the bond between the monosaccharide, which is known as glycosidic linkage or glycosidic bond. Example of disaccharides are glucose, sucrose, maltose, and also lactose. And the polymer of carbohydrates is polysaccharide. There are two types of polysaccharide: storage polysaccharides and structural polysaccharides, in which in plant, starch function as the storage polysaccharide, meanwhile glycogen function as the storage polysaccharide in animal. And for the structural polysaccharide, we have cellulose in plant and also chitin in animals.